Have you ever noticed the more you think about a decision, the worse it feels? In the early 2000s, a group of researchers led by A.P. Dijksterhuis ran a fascinating experiment. They wanted to test something very simple. Does thinking more actually lead to better choices? So they brought people into a lab and gave them a task. Participants were shown a set of posters. Some were visually appealing, some were not so great. Then they were divided into two groups. The first group was told, take your time, think carefully, analyze which poster you like the most. So they did. They compared details. They weighed pros and cons. They tried to make the perfect choice. The second group was given a strange instruction. Instead of thinking, they were distracted. They were asked to solve puzzles, simple ones, unrelated ones, anything that stopped them from consciously analyzing the posters. After some time, both groups were asked to choose. Which poster did they like the most? Simple experiment, right? But what happened next was unexpected. A few days later, researchers followed up. They asked participants a simple question: how happy are you with your choice? And this is where things got strange. The people who thought the most were actually less satisfied with their decision. They second-guessed it. They noticed flaws. They wondered if they made the wrong choice. But the people who were distracted, who didn't overthink, were more satisfied, more confident, more at peace with what they chose. Let that sink in. The group that used their brain less ended up feeling better about their decision. This became known as something powerful, something counterintuitive, something almost uncomfortable. The idea that conscious thinking can sometimes make decisions worse. But this wasn't just about posters. This pattern started showing up everywhere. In another version of the experiment, participants were asked to choose between apartments. Each apartment had multiple features: location, rent, size, noise level. Some options were clearly better overall, but only if you looked at the big picture. The thinking group got lost in details. They focused on small things, overanalyzed minor flaws, and often chose the worse apartment. But the distracted group, they somehow picked better options, without consciously analyzing everything, which raises a disturbing question. If thinking carefully can lead you to worse decisions, then what exactly is your brain doing? Why does something that feels so logical, so intelligent, so right, sometimes lead you in the wrong direction? And more importantly, if thinking too much can make you worse at choosing, then how many decisions in your life have already been affected? The job you picked, the relationship you stayed in, the opportunities you ignored. What if it wasn't because you didn't think enough, but because you thought too much? And this is where it gets deeper. Because what those researchers discovered was just the surface. There is a hidden system inside your brain, one that works quietly, automatically, without words, without effort. And sometimes it understands things better than your conscious mind ever could. So what is this hidden system inside your brain? The one that seems to make better decisions when you're not even trying. To understand this, we need to look at how your brain actually works. Psychologists often describe your mind as having two systems, not physically separate, but functionally different. One is slow, logical, careful. This is the part of you that analyzes, compares, and explains. The voice in your head right now. The other is fast, silent, effortless. It doesn't use words. It doesn't explain itself. But it's always working. This idea was popularized by Daniel Kahneman. He described them as System 1 and System 2. System 2 is what you trust, because it feels intelligent. It feels like control. It feels like you. But System 1, that's something else. It's built from years of experiences, patterns, emotions, tiny signals your conscious mind doesn't even notice. And here's the strange part. When decisions become complex, System 2 starts to struggle. Why? Because it has limits. Your conscious brain can only hold a few pieces of information at once. Maybe 4, maybe 5. After that, it gets overloaded. So what does it do? It simplifies. It starts focusing on what's easiest to compare, the most obvious details, the loudest features, and in doing so, it ignores what actually matters. That's exactly what happened in the experiment. The people who thought too much weren't thinking better. They were thinking narrower. They zoomed in and lost the bigger picture. But the distracted group, something else was happening. Even though they weren't consciously analyzing, their brain was still working, quietly, in the background, processing all the information, weighing patterns, connecting signals. This is sometimes called unconscious thought theory, the idea that your brain can solve complex problems without conscious effort. And it sounds strange until you realize something. Have you ever had this happen? You're stuck on a problem. You think about it for hours and get nowhere. Then you walk away, take a shower, go for a walk, or just lie down, and suddenly the answer appears out of nowhere. It feels like magic, but it's not. Your brain never stopped working. It just stopped talking. And when it stopped talking, it started understanding. Because conscious thinking isn't always clarity. Sometimes it's noise. It adds layers, doubts, what ifs, endless loops of analysis. And the more you stay in that loop, the further you move away from the actual answer. This is why overthinking feels productive, but often leads nowhere. You feel busy. You feel like you're doing something important, but in reality, you might just be going in circles. And there's something even more dangerous about this. Overthinking doesn't just affect decisions. It affects how you see yourself. You start questioning things that were once simple. Did I say the wrong thing? Did they misunderstand me? What if I made a mistake? Your brain begins to create problems that didn't exist before, not because reality changed, but because your thinking did. And slowly, without realizing it, you start trusting your thoughts more than your instincts, even when those thoughts are leading you away from the truth. But here's the uncomfortable part. If your conscious thinking can mislead you and your unconscious mind can sometimes guide you better, then how do you know when to think and when to stop? Because the answer isn't never think, and it's not always trust your gut. It's something more subtle, more balanced, and far more powerful. So if thinking too much can hurt you, and not thinking at all isn't the answer either, then what are you actually supposed to do? Because your brain isn't broken. It's not working against you. It's just being used in the wrong way. The truth is simple, but most people never realize it. Thinking is a tool, not a default state. And like any tool, if you use it at the wrong time, it stops helping and starts causing damage. The problem is, most people use thinking for everything. Big decisions, small decisions, past events, future fears, even things that don't need solving. Your brain becomes stuck in a loop. Think, doubt, rethink, repeat. And the more you stay in that loop, the harder it becomes to step out. So here's the shift. Rule 1. Think for simple things, feel for complex things. It sounds backwards, but it isn't. If a decision is simple, like choosing what to eat or what to wear, thinking works. But if a decision is complex, like choosing a partner, a career, or a life direction, your conscious brain doesn't have enough capacity to handle it all. That's where your deeper system comes in, the one that has been collecting patterns your entire life, the one that doesn't speak in words but understands in signals. Instead of forcing an answer, you step back, you take in the information, and then you give your brain space. That's when clarity appears. Not instantly, not loudly, but quietly. Brain rule 2. Stop solving problems that don't exist. A huge part of overthinking is this. Your brain tries to predict and control the future, but the future is uncertain, always has been. So your brain creates scenarios. What if this goes wrong? What if I fail? What if they judge me? But most of these problems never happen, yet you spend hours thinking about them, which means you suffer for things that don't even exist. The moment you see this clearly, something changes. You stop treating every thought as important, because not every thought deserves attention. Brain rule 3. Create distance from your thoughts. Here's something most people don't realize. You are not your thoughts. Thoughts appear, they stay for a moment, and then they leave. But when you attach to them, they grow stronger. Overthinking isn't just thinking more. It's believing every thought you have. Instead of saying, this thought is true, you start saying, this is just a thought. That small shift creates space. And in that space, your mind becomes clearer, quieter. And when your mind is quiet, you make better decisions. Not because you forced them, but because you allowed them. Brain the real truth. Thinking isn't your enemy, but uncontrolled thinking is. Because the same brain that helps you solve problems can also create them. And the difference between the two is awareness. Knowing when to think and when to stop. Because sometimes the smartest thing you can do is nothing. Just step back. Let your mind settle and trust the part of your brain that doesn't need words to understand. Because in the end, the goal isn't to think more, it's to think better. And sometimes thinking less is exactly how you do that. And if this made you see your mind a little differently, then it took a lot of time and deep research to bring this to you. So consider subscribing.